The Maya, mythical and mysterious. Over 2,000 years ago, they built gigantic cities in the middle of the jungle of Central America.
This was probably one of the greatest cities in the world.
Modern technology today reveals the true greatness of this ancient civilization. They built thriving cities, centers for trade, culture, and science.
Today we know that the Maya had a script that was developed to represent every aspect of their language.
The Maya set standards in astronomy and mathematics. Their legendary calendar is still considered a mathematical masterpiece today. With every new discovery, archaeologists are getting a little closer to the mystery of the Maya.
There's a full body. They smooshed him in there.
They reveal cruel rituals, but also one of the greatest discoveries of mankind.
If it wasn't for the Mayans, we wouldn't have corn today.
For a long time, the decline of the Maya culture was a mystery. But now, researchers believe they've found the reasons.
The stars predict our future. We all live under the big sky crocodile.
In the 9th century, the world of the Maya is in decline. But in their stories, their legacy lives on.
I am one of the lost of our community. We were once a great people. I'll tell you how we used to live, because I've lived it myself.
The rainforest in the border area between Guatemala and Mexico. Hills rise from the green sea of leaves. What look like volcanoes are actually giant pyramids, testimonies of an old metropolis, the sunken Mayan city of El Mirador. For the American archaeologist Richard Hansen, exploring this hidden world has become the work of a lifetime.
And then on the horizon over here, you see the pyramids of Mirador.
The sunken Mayan city can only be reached by helicopter. Hansen came here for the first time as a young student and made a groundbreaking discovery. These ruins are much older than previously thought. Maya settled here as early as 1000 BC. Hansen and his team of archaeologists are systematically researching the remains of the ancient metropolis. La Danta, the pyramid in the center, is one of the most powerful buildings of early civilization. According to Hansen's calculations, it is even bigger in volume than the Pyramid of Khufu in Egypt. The construction of such a step temple was an outstanding feat of strength. The Maya do not know any draft animals, neither wheel nor pulley, nor metal tools for stoneworking. Hansen has calculated that about 4,000 workers were busy building the pyramid day after day for 30 years.
This building is by far the tallest pyramid in the Americas, the largest in volume in the world, and we calculate about 2.8 million cubic meters of fill in this building, hauled basket by basket, every rock hauled by human beings.
For a long time, researchers could only estimate how far the sunken city once extended, for its buildings are hidden beneath the wild green of the jungle. Modern laser technology makes it possible to look underneath a dense green. LiDAR makes structures visible that remain hidden to the naked eye. The pictures do not only show pyramids and palaces, they also show defensive structures, terraces for agriculture, and even enclosures for the breeding of animals. Paths and roads become visible too. They connect El Mirador with the neighboring cities.
Our kings were mighty as the sun. Therefore they built pyramids, which were like mountains reaching unto heaven.
Around 800 BC, El Mirador is one of the most important centers of the Maya world.
That's an incredible story of humanity. And I don't think there's any European cities at this period of time that would have even started to match. This was all before Rome. Rome became the superpower, of course, in the world. But at this period of time, this was probably one of the greatest cities in the world.
El Mirador is laid out like many other Maya cities. In the center, the public squares with temple pyramids and palaces. Here, the Maya worship and sacrifice to their gods, celebrate their religious feasts. Probably more than 250,000 people lived in El Mirador itself, another million in the surrounding area. It is a garden city, plantations and orchards as far as the eye can see. People from near and far flock to the city to trade. The markets are transshipment points for goods and services of all kinds. The merchants from far and near offer their goods for sale, just like the craftsmen and peasants of the surrounding area.
You would have stonemasons and obsidian merchants and basalt merchants and shell merchants, all types of products that would have been available for trade and exchange.
Artists make valuable ceramics. Weapon makers praise knives and axes made of obsidian, a volcanic glass that is harder and sharper than our steel. Mussels, like the spiny oyster, are considered a luxury item, just like the green feathers of the quetzal, as a decoration for the hair. Green is the color of life for the Maya, and green jade is for them as gold for us. Payment is made with cocoa beans, a much sought-after product used also as a raw material for the production of the drink of the gods, cacao, drinking chocolate, a delicacy for the nobility.
So they had a complex system, a very complex economic and social system that allowed them a unique fluorescence that we don't find elsewhere in the Western Hemisphere.
Again and again, the archaeologists in El Mirador come across human remains of the Maya. Hansen's co-workers have discovered a cavity in the floor of a house, possibly a grave. Now they want to open it together. A large capstone blocks the archaeologists' access. Extreme caution must be exercised when removing it.
There we go.
There we go. There we go.
It's loose. All right. Keep it up there. Keep it up there. Okay. Now, let's pull this one out. Keep that capstone there. Yeah. That was close.
Mission accomplished.
Wait. Leave it out for just a minute.
A human being could be buried in this cavity.
Bunch of fallen stones.
There's another side stone there.
There's a full body. They smushed him in there.
What's a discovery? Later it will turn out that a man was buried here. The Mayans believe in life after death. The soul of the deceased goes down into the underworld. Only after numerous trials can it ascend to heaven.
The dead live with us. We give them food and incense, so they know we will not forget them.
For the Maya, it was important to live in a continuous exchange with their ancestors, to keep in touch with them. And that meant that the ancestors were buried in their own house, under the floor of the house. So one lived directly with the mortal remains of the ancestors, and the ancestors were omnipresent.
The skeleton is only partially preserved. Next to the skull, a bowl with an opening in the bottom. It probably lay on the face of the dead man, so that his soul could enter and leave through the hole. This find reveals information about the daily life of the Maya.
That's a beautiful bowl.
Correct. Got a lot of bone in it.
Next to the dead body, the researchers also find a bowl with small finger bones, possibly offerings from relatives. Blood sacrifices are not unusual for the Maya. Hansen has also found evidence of ritual self-mutilation in other graves. Perhaps they were a sign of a continuing bond with the deceased.
The story that occurred here is fascinating because it lets us understand a whole new society buried in a tropical forest system that we had no idea 30 years ago that existed.
In the meantime, archaeologists have scanned an area of over 2,000 square kilometers and identified over 60,000 building structures in the lowlands of Guatemala. The new data show this region was much more densely populated than previously thought. A surprise for the scientists, even though the rainforest looks green and lush, its fertile soil layer is thin and contains few nutrients.
Nowhere else in the world has there been a state-organized society that has emerged and flourished in such an obviously hostile environment.
In its heyday, Rome is as large as the region around El Mirador. But in order to supply this city with its millions of inhabitants, the Romans are dependent on grain deliveries from distant provinces, such as Egypt and North Africa. The Maya, on the other hand, can only consume what grows in their immediate environment. For a long time, it was a mystery how they could farm in the middle of the rainforest and feed so many people. The traces of their crops have long since been weathered in the soil of the jungle. But then the archaeologists come across a small Mayan village at the foot of a volcanic lake near the capital of El Salvador. This excavation site is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site because time seems to have stood still here, buried under meters of volcanic ash. It has conserved the daily life of the Maya. For the people who once lived here, a tragedy. For Maya researchers like Michelle Toledo, a stroke of luck.
Joya de Serén opens the door for us to explore the daily life of the community. This is why it's often compared to Pompeii.
The eruption probably occurred on a late summer day. The people go about their usual daily work and at first do not attach any importance to the rumbling of the nearby mountain.
The Loma Caldera volcano is located 800 meters from our current location. It's very close to the excavation site. At some places of the excavation site, we find ash layers of 3 meters, at others of almost 7 meters.
Water vapor has been rising from the Loma's sea crater for days. Light earth tremors shake the surrounding area. But this is nothing unusual for the people here. The gods have so far saved them from catastrophes.
I don't think they were aware that one day an eruption would destroy all their prosperity.
Even today, the eruptions of the volcano, which occurred shortly one after the other, are still clearly visible. In 15 layers, fine ash has settled over the Mayan village and preserved a time slice. It was only by chance that Joya de Seren was discovered in 1976 during excavation work. The finds make it possible to partially reconstruct the events of that day.
The first ash layers from this volcano are very fine and have preserved most of the archaeological remains: earthenware, pottery, even organic matter.
It was harvest season. The scientists suspect that the volcano erupted in the evening hours.
Our hypothesis is that a ceremony took place shortly before the eruption. It was a sort of harvest ceremony, and it was probably celebrated at night.
Among other things, the archaeologists found a ceremonial headdress, the skull of a deer. Other bone finds show that there was a roast venison before the eruption. Was it a Thanksgiving feast or a supplication ceremony? But then, first, ascending magma heats the water of the volcanic lake. A slight tremor heralds disaster. The water in the volcanic crater evaporates explosively. Then, the volcano erupts. Did the inhabitants have enough time to escape? A pyroclastic flow of gas and volcanic ash shoots down the mountain and buries everything under its deadly embers.
They had a good life, and suddenly this volcanic eruption happens, and prosperity is over. It's a sad feeling.
What happened to the villagers?
So far, we haven't found any human remains of the villagers. If they fled and didn't survive, we may still find them in excavations on the south side of the village.
What makes this Pompeii of the Maya so special are the plant findings. They show how the Maya provided for themselves. They are still clearly visible today, the beds around the buildings, preserved by the hardened ashes that have covered them like a protective layer. Where once there were plants, cavities have formed in the ashes.
This gives us a perfect shape, even if the heat has destroyed the material itself. But the shape of the plant was left in the ashes as a perfect imprint.
Michel Toledo fills the cavities with plaster. The casts tell of what was cultivated here in gardens and fields. The remains of a corn plant.
Maize was systematically cultivated in Joya de Serén. Corn was the most important food and their main source of energy.
The researchers have found areas of corn all over the village. A corn cob, as it was grown 1,500 years ago. Smaller than the corn cobs in our supermarkets today, but still clearly recognizable as their ancestor.
The first corn was trapped in the underworld. Then the lightning god came and split the earth with his hammer so that the corn could come out.
In Mayan mythology, corn is the gift of the gods, and they call themselves the corn people.
The gods processed the corn grains into dough. From it they formed us humans.
It is the creation myth of the Maya, but where corn actually came from remained a mystery for a long time. There is no plant in nature that has similar properties. Cultivated corn cannot reproduce without human help. Even when fully ripe, the seeds will not come off the cobs. Great advantage for Maya farmers. They can harvest the maize as required, transport and store it easily. Genetic analysis makes it possible to reconstruct the evolution of the crop. They document one of the greatest achievements of domestication by man. The ancestor of the corn plant, Teosinte, an inconspicuous wild grass. The few grains it produces contain hardly any nutrients and are covered by a hard, hardly digestible husk. The first farmers in Central America intuitively used random mutations to breed edible corn from wild grass.
The oldest corn cobs we know were probably this big. You can't feed a family on that. But they kept growing it. And isn't that what really makes a human being human? Testing and further developing to find out what is possible.
It is only through breeding that corn develops the properties that make it the most successful foodstuff in the world today. It can be harvested just 3 months after sowing. No other plant produces such a high yield in such a short time.
Without the Maya and their predecessor cultures, we would not have corn today. But not only would we not have corn, we wouldn't have many other crops either. Whether it's cocoa or avocado, whether it's tomatoes, beans, pumpkins, or chilies.
The fields of the ancient Maya were not monocultures, as is often the case today. In order to increase their harvest yields even more, they combined plants in the sowing process that form a symbiosis with each other. Corn, beans, pumpkins. The corn served as a climbing aid for the beans. The beans produce nitrogen, which they release into the soil, and which the corn needs for its growth. Finally, the leaves of the pumpkins protect the soil from too much sun and rain.
This is actually what makes Mayan society so fascinating from our current state of knowledge. Their ability, their competence to achieve all this in 1,500 years without chemical fertilizers.
Mayan farmers produce food in surplus and can thus supply not only for their own families, but also the people in the cities.
Corn was the basis of the Maya society. Without the cultivation of corn, the Mayan society could not have existed.
Around the turn of the century, the Maya settlement area stretches from Mexico to Guatemala and El Salvador. With the overproduction of food, the population grew and people were able to specialize. For a long time, El Mirador is the center of this world. But then, the Mayan success story of more than 1,000 years comes to a halt there for the first time. In the ruins of El Mirador, archaeologist Richard Hansen has discovered the traces of the city's demise, unfinished buildings like this pyramid.
They started building and stopped. This all happened about the time of Christ or shortly after, about 150 AD. And they left and walked away and never returned. The building was never finished.
But what made the inhabitants leave El Mirador? Hansen believes overexploitation of nature.
What's evident from the archaeological data and from the data we managed to evaluate here is there was a massive deforestation.
They used wood in enormous quantities for the increasingly magnificent stucco facings of the pyramids and buildings in the city. But the production of mortar is energy intensive. Stucco mortar is produced by burning natural limestone. The fire causes the stone to decompose into lime powder. For 1 ton of the coveted white powder, the Maya must burn 5 tons of wood. And the Maya use it not only to plaster their magnificent buildings, but also streets and public places. The floor covering of a platform is still clearly visible 2,500 years later.
You can see this thin layer that's about 3 to 4 centimeters thick. The floors are modest and very reasonable.
But over the centuries, the floor covering becomes thicker and thicker.
By the time of Christ, the average floor was 13 centimeters thick. They didn't need a floor that thick when they only needed one this thick. A tremendous waste of wood, tremendous waste of stone, tremendous waste of labor.
Ever larger forest areas are cleared to satisfy the hunger for stucco, with fatal consequences. Rain now washes away the bare soil. The seed of the farmers in the fields yields no crop anymore. The inhabitants of El Mirador have destroyed their own livelihood. Around 150 AD, the Maya left the city and the rainforest took possession of the once flourishing Metropolis again. They found a new home in the surrounding area and on the coast. New centers of power emerged. Even today, the remains of their magnificent buildings bear witness to the impressive creative power of the Maya in that era. It was the great heyday of the Maya culture, a union of large and small city-states. For 500 years, they are the most powerful civilization in Central America. Up to 15 million Maya live in an area half the size of Germany, whereas at the time, there were only 2 million inhabitants in Germany.
Between 400 and 800 AD, this was the region with the highest concentration of population in the world at that time.
And it's a strictly hierarchical society. The common people are slaves, peasants, craftsmen and merchants. They produce food and goods and must work for their rulers whenever needed. At the head of this social order are the god kings. They offer their subjects security, but above all, divine support.
The task of the kings was to perform rituals. That was the most important task. People always think kings must do politics, but rituals were politics, making sure the gods got food in time, that they received their offerings. The Mayans believed these activities would sustain the universe in its existence.
In the palaces of the rulers, the exploration of the will of the gods is turned into a science. Records of their priest-students are consulted. Manuscripts that record religious knowledge, but also scientific findings and the history of the Maya.
The codes, the books, give us an insight into Mayan thought, Mayan religion, and Mayan science. So here we can look into the minds of Mayan priests and scholars.
One of these codes is now kept in the treasure chamber of the Saxon State Library, a document of inestimable value. Only 4 copies of the many Maya manuscripts are still preserved today. For a long time, researchers assumed that the Maya used a pure pictographic writing. Today we know it is a script made up of word and syllable characters with which they could grasp even complex thoughts. They are therefore among the 5 advanced civilizations that developed their own script.
You have to imagine that there was a very rich book culture, and that there must have been thousands, tens of thousands of books. Probably every palace, every king, every priest had his own library.
Many of these Mayan manuscripts were to perish with the world of the Maya. The Spanish burnt most of it as devil's work. Nikolai Gruber is one of the few experts in the world who can read the ancient Mayan writing. He has translated the Dresden Codex.
Lahun Yashkin, Tsutsui Winigab, Kimil Yukul Kapchen.
That means on day 11 Ahau, in month 10 Yashkin, there will be death and an earthquake.
The Codex Dresdensis became world famous because it supposedly prophesizes the end of the world on its last page. The Maya are even said to have predicted a concrete date, December 21st, 2012. It did not happen. End-time nostalgics had misinterpreted the Codex.
Actually, the code tells us nothing about the end of the world. It's part of a chapter that deals with predicting rainy seasons and floods. And actually, there is no prophecy that refers to the year 2012. For the Maya, 2012 was simply the transition from one calendar period to the next.
Nevertheless, it remains an invaluable source. It enabled researchers to decipher the unique number system of the Maya for the first time. They even calculated with 0. They presented it in the form of a shell.
The Maya were probably the first people in the world, the first civilization in the world, to invent a character for the 0. They actually invented it.
The 0 is perhaps the greatest invention of mankind. Without it, complex computing processes would be impossible, our modern life unimaginable. Neither the ancient Greeks nor the Romans knew about 0. In Europe, people only began to calculate with 0 in the 12th century. Their mathematical knowledge helps the Maya with their astronomical observations. They precisely calculate the course of the planets and comets and other celestial phenomena in advance, without a telescope. In the projector room of the State Library, Nikolai Gruber works with a facsimile of the Dresden Codex. It was a manual, probably for a priest, in which important celestial phenomena were recorded.
These astronomical data were so important for the Maya because they saw gods in the celestial bodies and could read from the movements of the gods what fate they had to reckon with.
In order to be able to orientate themselves in the firmament, Mayan astronomers also used constellations, although often different from those we know. In this way, they keep track of their many capricious gods.
This page is part of a panel that deals with predictions about the planet Venus. For Venus was a god of war. And depending on where Venus was in the sky, the days were good or bad for starting wars and defeating the neighbors.
To record the course of time, the Maya used several calendars. The daily calendar of the Maya is the Hab. They used it to divide the solar year. As in our calendar, this calendar has 365 days. However, the Maya precisely calculated the solar year up to the third digit behind the decimal point. The religious year of the Maya counts 260 days. This results from the combination of 20 day names and 13 numbers, which the Maya regarded as holy numbers. The different calendars interlock like gears. With their help, the Maya priests determined the days for important rituals. To follow the religious instructions of the calendar is a holy duty. Kings must set a good example. Often the rulers have to undergo torturous rituals. According to Mayan belief, blood is the seat of the soul and the source of its vitality. Royal blood is particularly precious.
One of the essential elements of the Maya religion is the idea of a latent balance. That means the gods can give things like rain and fertility and corn plants and growth. But in the Mayan belief, this is only possible if they give the gods something in return.
A particularly great sacrificial service is the piercing of one's own penis with a ray sting. Drugs help the rulers to relieve their pain. The royal blood, the lifeblood from the ruler's fertile womb, is collected with strips of paper which are then burned. Their ashes are food for the gods.
The blood sacrifice the Mayan rulers demanded meant that at an important moment, you gave the best you had to the gods, even your own life force, to ask them for support.
The rulers know how to make an effective show of their closeness to the gods for their people. Chichen Itza, Mexico, the Kukulkan Pyramid, perhaps the most famous Mayan building and an architectural masterpiece. The pyramid is built in such a way that twice a year an amazing spectacle is to be seen. Always at the equinoxes in spring and autumn, the shadow of the evening sun seems to create a snake body sliding down the pyramid. Even today, thousands of visitors gather to witness this very special illusion. These are magical 45 minutes, which reflect the entire ability of the Mayan astronomers and builders.
Of course, kings who were able to predict the movements of celestial bodies thus proved their special relationship with these stars and the gods. It was an instrument of power, and it legitimized their power.
Solar and lunar eclipses are a special spectacle for the Maya. They herald disaster. When the sky darkens in broad daylight, human sacrifices, mostly prisoners of war, are supposed to avert the imminent danger. But these are also perfect demonstrations of power, which help the rulers to secure their position of power vis-à-vis the people. But then this seemingly God-given order is shaken. In the 9th century AD, most of the Mayan metropolises perish within a few decades.
The reason for the collapse of the Mayan culture is still one of the biggest and most exciting questions in Mayan archaeology, or archaeology in general. What happened to this great culture? Why did they abandon hundreds of cities? We ask ourselves this question again and again.
Researchers have long suspected that climate change may have contributed to the decline of the Mayan civilization. In order to reconstruct climate fluctuations of this epoch, the experts use soil samples. Sedimentary deposits are the memory of nature. Soil samples prove it. The Mayan people were repeatedly hit by severe droughts. Bright layers indicate phases of great water shortage. They develop when water dries up and salt deposits form. Scientists estimate that precipitation fell by at least 50% during this period.
In the 8th and 9th centuries, the severity of droughts increases. They become worse and last longer and longer. And this has a direct impact on Mayan agriculture.
The despair must have been great, because water's scarce on the Yucatan Peninsula anyway. There are no rivers. When rain falls, it quickly seeps into the porous limestone subsoil. During this time, many Maya probably left their settlements in search of regions with more water. The last hope for these people are often cenotes, sinkholes filled with water. They are the only major natural water resources on the peninsula. For a long time, researchers didn't pay much attention to these cenotes, but now they are systematically explored by divers. These are accesses to an underwater cave system that has formed in the bedrock of the Yucatan Peninsula over millions of years. The secrets that these underwater caves now reveal also give researchers a deep insight into the shocking circumstances that led to the fall of the Maya. The archaeologist Guillermo de Anda is dedicated to the study of this underwater world. One of the most spectacular discoveries de Anda made in 2002. Now he is returning to the site. The entrance is on an abandoned farm. The farmers of the area believed the opening to be an old well shaft from the Mayan period, but de Anda recognized its true meaning.
Here it is, a little sketch of this place. That's roughly the orientation. That's north. We're on a foundation with 4 pre-Hispanic-style entrances.
De Anda suspects that it is in fact a Mayan altar complex. The orientation of the opening according to the 4 cardinal points is an indication that the site served religious purposes, and the opening in the ground was seen as access to the Mayan underworld. For the Maya, cenotes are not only natural water reservoirs. In their imagination, the rain god Shark also lives there. They often pay homage to him with valuable gifts, jewelry, and incense. But in times of need, this is probably not enough. At the bottom of the cave, de Anda and his colleagues have already discovered shocking relics from the Mayan era, which they now want to take another look at.
I don't cease to be amazed when I am here. This is not, it's magical.
Every dive is a new adventure. No natural light reaches these depths.
And there's even more than cows here.
Probably the animal fell into the cenote in search of water.
Even moving so slowly. There's a lot of silt already.
Then, in the beam of light, a first human skull.
This is one of the best discoveries I have ever made.
Deander found more victims deep in the bottom of the cave. They bear traces of ritual mutilation. Many of them must date back to the end of the Mayan era.
It's sometimes sad. I wonder what this skull is telling us. What this person did when it was alive.
Even children are among the dead. In the end, the Maya sacrificed the most precious thing they possessed to appease the rain god.
There's bones everywhere.
But their sacrifice was of no effect. The droughts lasted for more than a century.
I believe we will learn and find out that climate change has had a decisive influence on the development of great civilizations. The case of the Maya, of course, is no exception.
But climate change is not the only reason for the demise of the Maya. Major political upheavals are happening during that time.
Our kings thought of nothing but themselves. I saw the sad times myself. I used to be a young servant in the king's palace. I was skillful with my hands.
In the 9th century, nobility and rulers still live in their palaces in the usual luxury. They do not realize that their world is on the verge of destruction. But wars among themselves destroy a fragile balance. The tried and tested order collapses.
A kind of power vacuum was created, and numerous smaller cities and smaller principalities tried to seize the opportunity and take over power. This led to more and more violence and outbreaks of war, the beginning of the end of the classical Maya culture.
The Mayan culture is sinking into war, chaos, turmoil. The ancient pact between the god-kings and their people is shattered. It had been the foundation of a successful advanced civilization for many centuries. Kings are overthrown. Once all-powerful princely families are driven from their seats of power. A civil war in the land of the Maya. Without their political leaders, who were responsible for the maintenance of the infrastructure and water supplies, many Mayan city-states are finally doomed.
Everything I tell you happened in exactly the same way.
The Maya abandoned their cities across the entire lowlands of the Yucatan Peninsula. It is the end of a civilization that ruled Central America for nearly 2,000 years. The jungle reclaims its territory. The few cities that survived the fall are later destroyed by the Spanish invaders.
A political system, the system of the divine kingship, has gone down. The cities are abandoned, but the people who lived in this culture, the farmers, they lived on.
The survivors of this collapse pass on their memories to their descendants.
Never forget, we are like the sun. In the evening, it descends into the underworld, and in the morning, it comes out again.
The splendid cities of the Maya may have perished, but the Mayan people still exist. Over 6 million Mayas still live in Mexico and other Central American countries. They are beginning to recall their important heritage.
What fascinates me so much about the Maya is this continuity from pre-Hispanic times to the present. That's what distinguishes the Maya from other ancient cultures, such as the Romans or the Egyptians, because many aspects of life have survived to the present day.
The great cities of the ancient Maya still bear witness to the creative power and cultural achievements of this ancient high culture.